I sometimes read public domain books here on Leaves of Glen, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist or sexist or bigoted. But in there somewhere and all that is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you are grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. Oh, hello, and welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You Haunted Mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a haunted mansion and not just recording in my basement. This is where I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to read Beyond the Wall and a Cold Night by Ambrose Bierce. Enjoy the scary music that I got from this old track from like 2 years ago. I pulled it out. It doesn't have little footsteps of you running up like a little idiot, but you're still an idiot and you're still here. Want to learn about the author? I hope so. I took the time to steal this from Wikipedia. Ambrose Gwinnett Bierce was born June 24th, 1842, and just died in 1914. That's all we know. He was an American short story writer, journalist, poet, and American Civil War veteran. A prolific and versatile writer, Bierce was regarded as one of the most influential journalists in the United States of America, and as a pioneering writer of realist fiction. For his horror writing, Michael Deidre ranked him alongside Edgar Allan Poe, and H.P. Lovecraft. And S.T. Joshi speculates that he may as well have been the greatest satirist America has ever produced. And in this regard can take his place with such figures as Juvenal, Swift, and Voltaire. His war stories influenced Stephen Crane, Ernest Hemingway, and others, and was considered an influential and feared literary critic. In recent decades, Bierce has gained wider respect as a fabulist and for his poetry. Want to hear some fun facts from hell that I stole from factsnippet.com? 34 facts about Ambrose Bierce. 1. In recent decades, Ambrose Bierce has gained wider respect as a fabulist and for his poetry. We just got that from Wikipedia. When's the goddamn grandfather clock going to go off so I can be done doing this? In 1913, Ambrose Bierce told reporters that he was traveling to Mexico to gain first-hand experience of the Mexican Revolution. I actually learned about that. He basically disappeared, and when people went down there asking about him, the people in the Mexican Revolution were just like, yeah, we don't really know much about him. And that kind of thing. They were like really covering it up. But hopefully we'll learn more about that. Ambrose Bierce was entirely English ancestry. What? All his forebears came from North America between 1620 and 1640 as part of the Great Puritan Market. Nobody cares how white he is. Ambrose Bierce often wrote critically of both Puritan values and people who, quote, made a fuss about genealogy. Number 5, Ambrose Bierce's parents were poor, but a literary couple who instilled in him a deep love for books and writing. When's his grandfather clock going to go off? Ambrose Bierce grew up in Cosacuso County, Indiana, attending high school at the county. These are not fun facts. 7, Ambrose Bierce left home at 15 to become a printer's devil. What is that? At a small abolitionist newspaper in the Northern Indian. Number 8, Ambrose Bierce briefly attended the Kentucky Military Institute until it burned down. Number 9, Ambrose Bierce participated in the operations in Western Virginia and was present at the Battle of Philippi and received newspaper attention for his daring rescue under fire of a gravely wounded comrade at the Battle of Rich Mountain. Number 10, Ambrose Bierce fought at the Battle of Shiloh, a terrifying experience that became a source of several short stories in the memoir What I Saw at Shiloh. Number 11, June 1864, Ambrose Bierce sustained a traumatic brain injury at the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain and spent the rest of his summer on furlough, returning to active duty in September. These are not. Okay, number 12, Ambrose Bierce was discharged from the Army in 1865. Number 13, Ambrose Bierce remained in San Francisco for many years, eventually becoming famous as a contributor or editor of newspapers and periodicals, including the San Francisco Newsletter, the Argonaut, the Overland Monthly, the Californian, and the Wasp. Number 14, Ambrose Bierce lived and wrote in England from 1872 to 1875, contributing to Fun magazine. Oh, thank God. These are the worst fun facts I've ever read in my entire life. Oh, there's a crow. I forgot to put a crow in here. Well, why don't we go back down to the Library of the Damned and read our first story. Now, you hear all that? I'm kind of proud of the fun little Halloween music that I stole from somewhere. I don't know. It's public domain. It's all fine. Let's read the first story. Here in my Library of the Damned, amongst these pumpkins with little candles in them. The candles warming the innards of the pumpkin, which makes them dripping wet, which makes the outside walls warm and moist. All these wet pumpkins all around you. Hundreds of wet pumpkins. Here, near the fireplace, in my library. First story is on the Wall, written in 1907. Many years ago, on my way from Hong Kong to New York, I asked a week in San Francisco. This is another Kindle book. I wonder if that's a screw-up. I got this thing for like 99 cents. I asked a week in San Francisco. A long time had gone by since I had been in that city, during which my ventures in the Orient had prospered beyond my hope. I was rich and could afford to revisit my own country to renew my friendship with such companions of my youth and still lived and remembered with me in an old affection. Chief of these, I hoped, was Mohan Dampier, an old schoolmate with whom I held a desultory correspondence which had long ceased, as is the way of correspondence between man. You know how it goes. You may have observed that the indisposition to write a merely social letter is in the ratio of the square of the distance between you and your correspondent. It is a law. I remember Dampier as a handsome, strong young fellow of scholarly tastes, with an aversion to work and a marked indifference to many other things that the world cares for, including wealth, of which, however, he had inherited enough to put him beyond his reach of his want. In his family, one of the oldest and most aristocratic in the country. It was, I think, a matter of pride that no matter of it had ever been in trade nor politics, nor suffered any kind of distraction. Mohan was a trifle sentimental and had in him a regular element of superstition, which led him to the study of all manner of occult subjects. Although his sane mental health safeguarded him against fantastic and perilous fates he had made during incursions into the realm of the unreal without renouncing his residence in the partly surveyed and charted region of what we are pleased to call certitude. The night of my visit to him, stormy. The Californian winter was on, and the incessant rain plashed. That's a word? I'm looking that up. Is plashed a word? Oh my God, it is. A sound produced by liquid striking something or being struck. All right, well, I got schooled by Ambrose Bierce. In the deserted streets, or lifted by irregular gusts of wind, it was hurled against the houses with incredible fury. With no small difficulty, my cabman found the right place, away out toward the ocean beach in a sparsely populated suburb. The dwelling, a rather ugly one, apparently stood in the center of its grounds, which, as nearly as I could make out in the gloom, were destitute of either flowers or grass. 3 or 4 trees, writhing and moaning in the torment of the tempest, appear to be trying to escape from their dismal environment, to take the chance of finding a better one out at sea. I see what he's saying there. That's kind of fun, like they're just running off. Oh, the house was a 2-story brick structure with a tower, a story higher, at one corner. In a window of that was only visible light. Something in the appearance of the place made me shudder. A performance that may have been assisted by a rill of rainwater down my back as I scuttled to cover the doorway. In answer to my note praising him of my wish to call, Dampier had written, don't ring. Open the door and come up. I did so, and the staircase was dimly lighted by a single gas jet at the top of the second flight. I managed to reach the landing without disaster and entered by an open door into the lighted square room of the tower. Dampier had come forward in a gown and slippers to receive me. giving me the greeting that I wished. And if I had held a thought that it might more fitly have been accorded to me at the front door, I first looked at him, dispelled any sense of his hospitality. It was not the same. Hardly past middle age, he had gone gray and acquired a pronounced stoop. His figure was thin and angular, and his face deeply lined, his complexion dead white, without a touch of color. His eyes, unnaturally large, glowed with a fire that was almost uncanny. He seated me, proffered a cigar, and with grave and obvious sincerity assured me of the pleasure that it gave him to meet me. Some unimportant conversation followed, but all the while I was dominated by the melancholy sense of the great change in him. This must have been perceived, for he suddenly said with a bright enough smile, are you disappointed in me? Non sum qualis eram? Well, I hardly know what to reply, but managed, why, really, I don't know. Your Latin is about the same. He brightened again. No, he said. Being a dead language, it grows in inappropriateness. But please, have the patience to wait. Where am I going? There is perhaps a better tongue. Will you care to have a message in it? His smile faded as he spoke, and as he concluded, he was looking into my eyes with a gravity that distressed me, and yet I was not to surrender myself to his mood, nor permit him to see how deeply his prescience of death affected me. I fancy that'll be long, I said, before human speech will cease to serve our need, but when the need, with its possibilities of service, will have passed. I made no reply, and I too was silent, for the talk had been taken a dispiriting turn, and yet I knew not how to give it a more agreeable character. Suddenly, in a pause of the storm, when the dead silence was almost startling by contrast with the previous uproar, I heard a gentle tapping, which appeared to come from the wall behind my chair. The sound was such as might have been made by a human hand, but not upon a door as one asking admittance, but rather, I thought, as an agreed signal, an assurance of someone's presence in the adjoining room. Most of us, I fancy, have had more experience with such communications than I should care to relate. What does that mean? I glanced at Dampier. Possibly there was something of amusement in the look. He did not observe it. He appeared to have forgotten my presence. He was staring at the wall behind me, with an expression in his eyes like I'm unable to name, although my memory of it is as vivid today as was my sense of it to them. The situation was embarrassing, and I rose to take my leave, and at this he seemed to recover himself. Please be seated, he said. It's nothing. No one's there. But the tapping was repeated, and with it the same gentle, slow insistence as before. Pardon me, I said. It's late. May I call tomorrow? He smiled, a little mechanically. I thought, it is very delicate of you, said he, but quite needless. Really, this is the only room in the tower. And there is no one there, at least. M-. He left the sentence incomplete, rose, and threw up a window, only opening in the wall from which the sound seemed to come. See? Not clearly knowing what else to do, I followed him to the window and looked out. The street lamp, some little distance, gave way enough light through the murk of the rain that was again falling in torrents to make it entirely plain that no one was there, in quotes. In truth, there is nothing but the sheer blank wall of the tower. Dampier closed the window and, signing to me to the seat, resumed his own. The incident was not in itself particularly mysterious. Any one of a dozen explanations possible, though none has occurred to me, yet it impressed me strangely. The more, perhaps, from my friend's effort to reassure me, which seemed to dignify it with a certain significance and importance. He had proved that no one was there, but in fact lay all the interest. He proffered no explanation. His silence was irritating. It made me resentful. My good friend, I said, somewhat ironically, I fear I am not disposed to question your right to harbor as many spooks as you find agreeable. Your taste consistent with your notions of companionship. But that is no business of mine. But just being a plain man of affairs, mostly of this world, I find spooks needless to my peace and comfort. I am going to go to my hotel, where my fellow guests are still in the flesh. It's not a very civil speech, but he manifested no feeling about it. Kindly remain, he said. I'm grateful for your presence here, but what you have heard tonight, I believe myself to have heard twice before. Now I, all caps, know it was no illusion. That is much to me. More than you know, have a fresh cigar and a good stock of patience while I tell you the story. The rain was now falling more steadily, with a low, monotonous susurration. Not looking it up. Interrupted at long intervals by the sudden flashing of the boughs of the trees, and the wind rose and failed. The night was well advanced, but both sympathy and curiosity held me a willing listener to my friend's monologue, which I did not interrupt by a single word from beginning to end. 10 years ago, he said, I occupied the ground floor apartment of one of the row houses, all alike, away at the other end of town, and on what we call Rincon Hill. And this had been the best quarter of San Francisco, but had fallen into neglect and decay, partly because the primitive character of domestic architecture no longer suited the maturing tastes of the wealthy citizens, partly because certain public improvements had made a wreck of it. The row of dwellings, in one of which I lived, stood a little way back from the street, each having a miniature garden, whatever, it's my show, separated from its neighbors by low iron fences and bisected with mathematical precision by a box-boarded gravel walk from gate to door. One morning, as I was leaving my lodging, I observed a young girl entering the adjoining garden on the left. Oh, it was a warm day in June, and she was lightly gowned in white. From her shoulders hung a broad straw hat profusely decorated with flowers and wonderfully beribboned in the fashion of the time. My attention was not long held by the exquisite simplicity of her costume, for no one could look her in the face and think of anything earthly. Oh, do not fear, I should not profane it by description. Oh, it is beautiful exceedingly. All that I had ever seen or dreamed of loveliness was in that matchless living picture by the hand of the divine artist. So deeply did it move me that, without a thought to the impropriety of the act, I unconsciously bared my head. As a devout Catholic or well-bred Protestant uncovers before the image of the Blessed Virgin, the maiden showed no displeasure. She merely turned her glorious dark eyes upon me with a look that made me catch my breath. Without other recognition of my act, it passed into the house. For a moment, I stood motionless, hat in hand, painfully conscious of my rudeness, yet so dominated by the emotion inspired by that vision of incomparable beauty that my penitence was less poignant than it should have been. Then I went my way, leaving my heart behind. In the natural course of things, I should probably have remained away until nightfall. But by the middle of the afternoon, I was back in the little garden, affecting the interest in the few foolish flowers that I had never before observed. My hope was in vain. She did not appear. To a night of unrest succeeded a day of expectation and disappointment. But on that day after I wandered aimlessly about the neighborhood, I met her. Oh, of course I could not repeat my folly of uncovering, nor venture, even by so much as to long a look to manifest an interest in her. Yet my heart was beating audibly. I trembled and consciously colored as she turned her big black eyes upon me with a look of obvious recognition, entirely devoid of boldness or coquetry. I will not weary you with particulars. Many times afterwards I met the maiden, and yet neither either addressed her or sought to fix her attention, nor did I take any action toward making her acquaintance. Perhaps my forbearance, requiring so supreme an effort of self-denial, would not be entirely clear to you. But that I was heels over head in love is true. But who can overcome this habit of thought or reconstruct his character? I was what some foolish persons are pleased to call, and others, more foolish, are pleased to be called, an aristocrat. And despite her beauty, her charms and graces, the girl was not of my class. Oh, I had learned her name. It is needless to speak, and something of her family. She was an orphan, a dependent niece of the impossible elderly fat woman whose lodging house she lived. My income was small, and I lacked the talent for marrying. It is perhaps a gift. An alliance with the family would condemn me to its manner of life, part me from my books and studies, and in a social sense reduce me to the ranks. It's easy to appreciate such considerations as these. I have not retained myself for the defense. Let judgment be entered against me, but in strict justice all my ancestors for generations should be made co-defendants, and I be permitted to plead in mitigation, whatever, it's my show, a punishment, the imperious mandate of heredity. Oh, to a malleisance, which is probably French, of that kind of every globule of my ancestral blood, spoke in opposition. In brief, my tastes habits, instinct, with whatever reason my love had left me, all fought against it. Moreover, I was an irreclaimable sentimentalist, and I found a subtle charm in the impersonal and spiritual relation which acquaintance might vulgarize and marriage would certainly dispel. No woman, I argued, is what this lovely creature seems. Love is a delicious dream. Why should I bring about my own awakening? The course dictated by all this sense and sentiment was obvious. Honor, pride, prudence, preservation of my ideals all commanded me to go away. But for that I was too weak. The utmost that I could do by a mighty effort of will was to cease meeting the girl. And that I did. I even avoided the chance encounters in the garden, leaving my lodgings only when I knew that she had gone to her music lessons and returning after nightfall. Yet all the while I was in one in a trance, indulging the most fascinating fantasies and ordering my entire intellectual life in accordance with my dream. Oh, my friend, as for one whose actions have a traceable relation to reason, you cannot know the fool's paradise in which I lived. One evening, the devil put it in my head to be an unspeakable idiot. By apparently careless and purposeless question, I learned from my gossipy landlady that the young woman's bedroom adjoined my own. A party wall between. A party wall? Yielding to a sudden and coarse impulse, I gently rapped on the wall. There was no response. Naturally, but I was in no mood to accept a rebuke. A madness was upon me, and I repeated the folly, the offense, but again, ineffectually, and I had the decency to desist. An hour later, while absorbed in some of my infernal studies, I heard, or thought I heard, my signal afterwards. Flinging down my books, I sprang to the wall as steadily as my beating heart would permit and gave 3 slow taps upon it. This time the response was distinct, unmistakable. 1, 2, 3, an exact repetition of my signal. That was all I could elicit, but it was enough. Too much. The next evening, and for many evenings afterward, that folly went on, I always having the last word. During the whole period, I was deliriously happy, but with perversity of my nature, I preserved in my resolution not to see her. Burp. Then, as I should have expected, I got no further answers. She is disgusting, I said to myself. With what she thinks, my timidity is making no more definite advances, and I resolved to seek her and make her acquaintance. And what? I did not know, nor do I know now. What might have come of it? I only know that I passed days and days trying to meet her, and all in vain. She was invisible as well as inaudible. I haunted the streets where we had met, but she did not come. And from my window I watched the garden in front of her house, but she passed neither in nor out. I fell into the deepest dejection, believing that she had gone away, yet took no steps to resolve my doubt by inquiry of my landlady, to whom, indeed, I had taken an unconquerable aversion from her having once spoken of the girl with less of reverence than I thought befitting. There came a fateful night, worn out with emotion, irresolution, and despondency. I had retired early and fallen into such a sleep as still possible to me. In the middle of the night, some malign power, bent upon the wrecking of my peace forever, caused me to open my eyes and sit up, wide awake and listening intently for I knew not what. Then I thought I heard a faint tapping on the wall, the mere ghost of the familiar signal. In a few moments, it was repeated. 1, 2, and 3, no louder than before, but addressing a sense alert and strained to receive it, I was about to reply when the adversary of peace again intervened in my affairs with a rascally suggestion of retaliation. She had long and cruelly ignored me. Now I would ignore her. Incredible fatuity. May God forgive it. All the rest of the night I lay awake, fortifying my obstinacy with shameless justifications and listening. Late the next morning, as I was leaving the house, I met my landlady, entering. Good morning, Mr. Dampier, she said. Have you heard the news? I replied in words that I had no news. In matter of that, I did not care to hear any. The manner escaped her observation. About the sick young lady next door, she babbled on. What? Did you not know? Oh, why, she's been ill for weeks. And now, I almost sprang upon her. And now, I cried, now what? She's dead. That's not the whole story. In the middle of the night, as I learned later, the patient, awakening from a long stupor after a week of delirium, had asked, it was her last utterance, that her bed be moved to the opposite side of the room. Those in attendance had thought the request a vagary of her delirium, but she had complied. And there was the poor passing soul had exerted its failing will to restore a broken connection. A golden thread of sentiment between its innocence and a monstrous baseness owing a blind, brutal allegiance to the law of self. Oh, what reparation could I make? Are there masses that can be said for the repose of souls that are abroad such nights as this? Spirits, blown about by viewless winds, coming in the storm and the darkness with signs and portents hinting of memory and presages of doom. This is the third visitation, and on the first occasion I was too skeptical to do more than verify by natural methods the character of the incident. On the second, I responded to the signal after it had been several times repeated, but without result. Tonight's reoccurrence completes the fatal triad. Expounded by Parapelius Necromantius, there is no more to tell. When Dampier had finished his story, I could think of nothing relevant that I cared to say, and to question him would have been a hideous impertinence. I rose and bade him good night in a way to convey to him a sense of my sympathy, which he silently acknowledged by a pressure of the hand. That night, alone with his sorrow and remorse, he passed into the unknown. Well, that seems like a good place to stop. Do you want to go to the read some ghastly books from Penguin Random House in my grotesque basement of the grotesqueries? Sure. Why don't we go down there? It's October. I'm taking a break from the other book. Why don't we just enjoy spooky stuff in October and go down to my spooky basement? You keep saying it's spooky. It's nice down there. It's got a couch and TV, and I got a Google television hooked up to. It's fine. It's a modern basement with all the amenities. Just go down there, and I'll tell you about new books. Oh, there you are. Yeah, the music's really weird, but the basement's not that creepy. I mean, it sounds really creepy down here because I picked this music like 2 or 3 years ago, but it's not that bad. Let's learn, since it's October, a scary book coming out from Penguin Random House called The World of Lore, Monstrous Creatures by Aaron Mahnke. It's Aaron Mahnke from the podcast. He's really been pushing his crap. He got Amazon TV to do a thing for him, and now he's just pushing books. I don't know what's with this guy. You make enough money, just settle down and do your podcast. But whatever, The World of Lore, Monstrous Creatures by Aaron Mahnke. You want to learn more about the book? Sure, why not? Oh my God, there's a ton here. They live in shadows, deep in the forest, late at night, in the dark recesses of our minds. They've spoken in stories and superstitions, relics of an unenlightened age. Old wives' tales passed down through generations, yet no matter how wary and jaded we have become, as individuals or society, a part of us remains vulnerable to them. Werewolves, wendigos, poltergeists, and vampires, angry elves, and vengeful spirit, angry elves. In this beautifully illustrated volume, the host of the hit podcast Lore serves as a guide to a fascinating journey through the history of the terrifying creatures, exploring not only the legends, but what they will tell us about ourselves. Aaron Mahnke invites us to the desolate Pine Barrens of New Jersey, where the notorious winged, red-eyed Jersey Devil dwells. He delves into harrowing accounts of cannibalism, some officially documented, others the stuff of speculation. Perhaps he visits the dimly lit rooms where seances take place, the European villages where gremlins make mischief, and even Key West, Florida, home of a haunted doll named Robert. In a world of emotional vampires and zombie malls, the monsters of folklore have become both a part of our language and a part of our collective psyche. Whether these beasts and boogeymen are real or just a reflection of our primal fears, we know on some level. Not that every mystery has been explained, and that the unknown still holds the power to strike fear deep in our hearts and souls. As Aaron Mahnke reminds us, sometimes the truth is even scarier than lore. That's a podcaster just pulling together stories of crap and printing a book about it, because apparently this guy just constantly needs more money. You can get it in paperback for $18.99, coming out October 8th. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Bookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's, Target, and if you want to purchase this book in the scariest of places, Walmart. Well, with that, why don't we go back upstairs and read our next story? All right. Take a seat. Yes, sit amongst the sweaty pumpkins. The sweaty, moistened pumpkins that are making the room humid and smell kind of weirdly sweet and gross because I put vanilla candles in them. It doesn't matter. Let's just read the next story. A Cold Night, written in 1893. The first day's battle at Stone River had been fought, resulting in disaster to the Federal Army, which had been driven from its original ground at every point except extreme left. The weary troops, at this point, lay behind a railway embankment to which they had retired, and which had served them during the last hours of the fight as a breastwork to repel repeated charges of the enemy. Behind the line, the ground was open and rocky. Great boulders, B-O-W-L-D-E-R-S, lay about everywhere, and among them lay many of the Federal dead, where they had been carried out of the way, and before the embankment the dead of both armies lay more thickly, but they had not been disturbed. Among the dead, in the boulders, lay one of whom nobody seemed to know, a Federal sergeant, shot directly in the center of the forehead. One of our surgeons, from idle curiosity and possibly with a view of amusement to a group of officers during the lull of engagement, we needed something to divert our minds, had pushed his probe clean through the head. The body lay on its back, its chin in the air, with the straightened limbs as rigid as steel, frost on his white face and in his beard and hair. Some Christian soul had covered it with a blanket, but when the night became pretty sharp, a companion of the writer removed this, and we lay beneath it ourselves. With the exception of our piquets, who had been posted well on the front of the embankment, every man lay silent. Conversation was forbidden, and we had made a fire, or even stuck a match to light a pipe would have been a grave offense. Stamping horses, moaning, wounded, everything that made a noise had been sent to the rear. The silence was absolute. Those whom the chill prevented from the sleeping nevertheless reclined as they shivered, or, sat with their hands on their arms, suffering but making no sign. Everyone had lost friends, and all expected death on the morrow. These matters are mentioned to show the improbability of anyone going about during these solemn hours to commit a ghastly practical joke. When the dawn broke, the sky was still clear, and we shall have a warm day, the writer's companion whispered as he rose in the gray light. Let us give back the poor devil his blanket. The sergeant's body lay in the same place, 2 yards away, but not in the same attitude. Oh, is upon his right side. The knees were drawn up neatly to the breast, both hands thrust to the wrist between the buttons of his jacket, the collar of which was turned up, concealing the ears. The shoulders were elevated, the head was retracted, and the chin rested on the collarbone. The posture was that of one suffering from intense cold, but for what they had been previously observed, but for the ghastly evidence of the bullet hole, one might have thought the man died of cold. Well, that's the end of that story. Real nice and short. I love a good, short, punchy story. Real punchy. Real short and punchy. Why don't we retire down to the, what do I call it in October? The haunted smoking room, where we can review what the hell we just read. Oh, there you are. Why don't you come and take a little seat? And there, on the coffee table before you, you can see a baboon skull. And if you remove the cranium of that skull, you'll see that it's filled with cigarettes. Why don't you have one? Oh, it's delicious. I love cigarettes. Changed up the theme of the, see, crows? All my wife's birds turned into crows. It's the Halloween episode. I'm gonna have a couple more of these, so get used to the crows. What did we read? A story about a story about a man who developed a crush on a beautiful woman and did not know her or talk to her. A little bit of a, kind of a little loser guy. Like, just go say hi. It's not a big deal. Just go, oh, hey, I sure do like your eyes. I don't know. No, that's creepy. Don't say that to somebody. Just say hi. But in either case, he was too scared to talk to her, and then he wound up getting resentful towards her about it for some weird reason. Found out he's got a room right next to her, which is kind of weird, and then started rapping on the wall like a little creep. But then, as she's dying, that was her only connection with somebody else. And so then she raps back, and then she dies, and she keeps rapping, and he's creeped out. Then I guess he dies, because the third time, the evil triad, or whatever they called it. It was a creepy story. It could have been elaborated on, but like kind of like the one thing I like about Ambrose Bierce is he just kind of writes these weird slice of life things, or just like kind of stories without like a big dramatic purpose. It's always a little like a story somebody would tell you kind of thing. And I kind of like that a little bit. That's why I'm making this the Ambrose Bierce October. I'm just going to read nothing but his stuff. God, that's loud. I got to do something about those crows. So anyways, then the next story is a guy gets shot in the head. They're all a bunch of jerks, and they pass like the little like metal wand through the hole to the back and laugh like, ha ha ha, look at that, it went through his head. But it turns out he wasn't probably dead. You could say that it's like some sort of afterlife ghostly thing, but when somebody gets shot, it's not like the movies where you just die instantly, you just drop to the ground and you're not alive anymore. Especially when you get shot in the head, you kind of live for a while. You just have severe brain damage. Kind of like Abraham Lincoln got shot and he like lived for days just with a high fever and suffering and stuff before he finally passed away. So maybe the point of this story is less about like real short, where it's just like, oh, maybe his ghost came in and did something ghostly with his body to look like he died. I think he's trying to say that this guy was still alive while we were all making him suffer, and then we took his blanket from him because we thought he was dead, but he was probably just still alive and not able to like communicate or move, and so then he died of freezing overnight. So that actually makes the story a lot more creepy, even though it's only 2 pages long. Well, there you go. That's what you get for October. I'll be back next week with more Ambrose Bierce stories, and I will hopefully see you then. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people, not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also, just stay in the curious mind, we made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly, glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdlinger or a dork. Now, back to business. I can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.